Welcome to Stop Now. Hi, Nate. Hi, Cole.
What's going on, JK?
All right. So we are joined this week on the TED Circles. You all know that very well, that we have been doing quite a bit of TED Circle talk shows.
We've done a lot of TED Circles lately. We've talked about imagination. We've talked about boredom. We've talked about the role of technology in society. I think my favorite one that we've done, JK, was talking about having a scout mindset versus that soldier mindset. So we've had a lot of great conversations sparked through these TED Circles and some of the videos we watched. And this week will be no different, Cole. I'm glad that you're able to join us for this one because I'm certainly excited to hear your opinions on the topic that we're getting into this week. And I'm excited. I don't want to waste any time. I know the folks are excited to see what we're going to discuss this week and what paths this conversation will take, because it's never been a dull moment, whether it's been me and Savita or me and JK and now me and Cole. So yeah, let's get this party started, JK. I think the preamble is done with. Let's get into these topics, man.
All right, Cole, you want to jump in and say something? And before that, I just wanted to tell that, for the viewers who are not aware of it, TED Circle provides a theme for every month. Mm-hmm. And this month it is optimism. And so we are basically trying to do that. Hosting is fun and easy, and everyone or anyone can host the TED Circle. And that's quite explanatory in their website. People can go there and they can do that. And just to have a starter kind of thing for this month's theme, as I mentioned, that they have put in some videos, we can watch that and we can start our conversation. Is optimism a perspective, or it's a bias, or a catalyst, or is it a necessity, or is it all the above? So there are certain quite interesting and fascinating TED Talks.
So a good one to start with, I think, the optimism bias, to start out with how humans misjudge the outcome of their own personal efforts. That's a good one to start with. And then, of course, then Steven Pinker, I think after that would be great. Optimism for me is a very sour subject. I'm glad to be here, glad to be a part of the team, but not my forte. So we'll see how it goes.
And I think that's, I was going to say, Cole, I think that's kind of the beauty of the team where, we talked about this, I want to say last time we did a TED Circle, JK, because I was kind of cast in the light of the optimist. JK was kind of cast in the light of, maybe somebody who's a bit more pessimistic, and Savita was just kind of in the middle, maybe the realist. And so I'm interested to hear what your thoughts on this are, Cole, just because from my personal experience, I'm somebody who I would classify myself as an optimist, but not an optimist that doesn't see what's really going on, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I kind of have to train myself into a kind of optimism, but it's basically the end up experience is that I train myself in this optimism, but deep down I kind of know somewhere that the awful truth will show itself. So, but always trying to deny that, still trying to be the optimist, but just can't do it. So let's let me bring my cynical perspective to this conversation.
Yeah, Nate, you are in trouble this time because you are an optimist, and I'm going to be the other side, and we are facing already the neutralist, the realist disappeared. Realism disappeared. Savita is no more here. So let's play that out. And
I'm going to talk to you about optimism, or more precisely, the optimism bias. It's a cognitive illusion that we've been studying in my lab for the past few years, and 80% of us have it. It's our tendency to overestimate our likelihood of experiencing good events in our lives and underestimate our likelihood of experiencing bad events. So we underestimate our likelihood of suffering from cancer, being in a car accident. We overestimate our longevity, our career prospects. In short, we're more optimistic than realistic, but we are oblivious to the fact. Take marriage, for example. In the Western world, divorce rates are about 40%. That means that out of 5 married couples, 2 will end up splitting their assets. But when you ask newlyweds about their own likelihood of divorce, they estimate it at 0%. And even divorce lawyers, who should really know better, hugely underestimate their own likelihood of divorce. So it turns out that optimists are not less likely to divorce, but they are more likely to remarry. In the words of Samuel Johnson, remarriage is a triumph of hope over experience. This is a really important point because we're optimistic about ourselves, we're optimistic about our kids, we're optimistic about our families, but we're not so optimistic about the guy sitting next to us. And we're somewhat pessimistic about the fate of our fellow citizens and the fate of our country. But private optimism about our own personal future remains persistent. And it doesn't mean that we think things will just magically turn out okay, but rather that we have the unique ability to make it so. I think this cartoon portrays it nicely, because if you're one of these pessimistic penguins up there who just does not believe they can fly, you will certainly never will. Because to make any kind of progress, we need to be able to imagine a different reality, and then we need to believe that that reality is possible. But if you are an extreme optimistic penguin who just jumps down blindly and hoping for the best, you might find yourself in a bit of a mess when you hit the ground. But if you're an optimistic penguin who believes they can fly, but then adjusts a parachute to your back, just in case things don't work out exactly as you planned, you will soar like an eagle, even if you're just a penguin. Thank you.
All right. So I guess we need to be penguins with parachutes, Cole. That's what we can take away from this, man.
So the question rises, for me in this is, so where do we stand in terms of optimism, right? So should we from the pessimistic, as you mentioned, Nate, I'm going with that. Being a pessimist is not bad. Why I say that is at the end of the life, right? Even if you are suffering from cancer or you're terminally ill, and even if not, right? The end is death. We all are going to die, right? Mm-hmm. So that might sound like pessimist, but that's the ultimate reality. And in this life, then why are we trying to be optimist? What is the logic, right? Whatever you are trying to be optimist about, at the end you are going to die, no matter what. So what do you have to say about that?
I think maybe they should have asked the question, what are your chances of dying? And if everybody's at 100%, then everybody's good. But the thing is that not everybody has the same chance of getting cancer, Some people have the 30% chance. Some people actually have a 50% chance or something because of, things that, their lifestyle or whatever. So maybe they actually have sort of significant guesses, and then they kind of, improve or degrade their estimation by saying 30%, and they're either cheered up by that, or they're kind of pessimistic about it, so they're gonna defend themselves a little bit. So they defend themselves by saying, "Oh, probably not that much. I've led a really good life. I haven't smoked any cigarettes. So run every day. I just eat only raw food diet. I think I got a pretty low chance of cancer." And they're like, "No, it's 30%. It's yeah. So the statistics are weird here.
And I think on that point with the optimism bias, Cole, I do feel to JK's point about everybody's gonna die. We just don't know when. We just don't know how. But we're not gonna live forever. But I do feel for me personally, I would classify myself as an optimist, but I wouldn't, have the rose-colored glasses or the rose-tinted spectacles, as she put it. I don't walk around with those on, but I do think that for me personally, and maybe this is just because of the way I grew up and my life experience and, growing up in a black household with parents that grew up doing the civil rights movement and grandparents that were active in those things, like that took optimism, right? Like that took, like, the world is terrible, especially if you look like my parents and my grandparents did at the time. And it's like, that took optimism to say we're going to change things, even though it doesn't seem like things are able to change. And I feel like those were penguins with the parachute, because they knew the reality that some of us aren't going to make it out of this. Some of us might be killed or jailed or whatever, but we have to kind of take that leap to make things better. And so, like, I do think we all need a bit of hope and faith. And I'm not talking about spiritual faith. I mean, just like faith that things can get better, but we do have to be realistic about it. We do have to be truthful and honest with ourselves, Cole. But I wouldn't, me personally, I wouldn't want to live in a world where people didn't have that optimism or didn't have that hope, because I think those folks are the folks that kind of get the ball rolling. And like, I think if people have to be either optimistic or really pissed off to get change started. And so I think those are the two things. Like, you need somebody that's fed up and tired, or somebody that's like, I think this can be better, in order for change to start to slowly happen.
Like, actually, not dwell on those wordings of optimism or pessimism as such. What I liked was, like, she was mentioning about the assumptions, right? So we all go with the assumptions, whether we have a high expectations or low expectations, right? So
yeah,
that is the surprising part. If my understanding is like, I have a low expectation, right? People are not going to turn up on time, or people are not going to do things, or something bad is always going to happen. So why worry about it? So which puts us in the pedestal of not to try harder and not being optimist, but I would say, like, okay, I have a high standard, high expectation. I want things to be done somehow. So I will keep trying till that gets. And that way, in a sense, like, I would say, like, I do fall in the category of optimist, right? Because it's not that, like, I plan for the unexpected things and try to have low expectations, not to have high expectation and get disappointed. But the surprise part in her research and what she said was, like, have high expectation, and then you will, at least you will reach the goal. Or if you not reach the goal, you will get halfway through somewhere. So that is kind of a surprise takeaway I got it from this.
Like, I know it's a cliche, but one of the things, like, my dad always told me growing up, and it still sticks with me, is, hope for the best and plan for the worst. Like, that's a cliche, but it's true for me, at least. Like, I can hope and be optimistic, Cole, but that doesn't mean that I'm not realistic. It doesn't mean that, when I go out driving, it doesn't mean that I don't put my seatbelt on, because I might get into a wreck and the seatbelt might keep me from dying. It doesn't mean that, when I quit smoking cigarettes, like, it means, like, hey, like, there's a better chance that I don't get cancer if I stop smoking these cigarettes than if I keep smoking these cigarettes. So I do think, and maybe JK is right in terms of, like, the terminology around it. Maybe it's too cut and dry with optimism and pessimism, but I do think there's a balance. There's a midpoint where you can be hopeful, but also you can be prepared and realistic, I think.
Oh yeah, and that's where the next video is going to come really into play, like exactly what you're saying. Like, almost exactly, like, the next video is going to show the pessimism bias about society that everybody has. So everybody's got an optimism bias about themselves, but I guess I shouldn't spoil it.
I do think that was a really interesting point that I didn't think of, Cole, at the very beginning of the video, when she was like, everybody, and I didn't even think about it, because I know some people, like, at work that I would classify as pessimists. But if you ask those questions, like, are you good with people? Are you a good driver? Are you a good husband, or whatever? All those questions, they would probably be very optimistic about themselves, even though every day when they come into work, they're always like, oh, this is going to mess up, or that's messed up. And it's like, I never thought about that in that way, where we do, even if we're somebody that's not necessarily an optimist, we all probably think the best, or at least want the best for ourselves.
See, I always thought the most interesting people were the ones who said, "I'm not smart," or they said, I'm not really that interesting," or people who say, I'm not really good with people. Mm-hmm. Like, those people are the best with people. Like, yes. They regard them with kind of like a, standoffish, like dry sense of humor. I love that.
I don't know if that's a situation of pessimism, or is it like a self-image thing, or what?
Or how you project, how you're projecting your self-image versus like what you actually believe. Like, secretly you think you're smart, but like outside you say, I'm not smart, because you don't want the attention. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something going on there for sure.
Then that points to the other question, right, of the environment in which, as you, Nate, put it, like being in the Black community with the parents and the grandparents going through that, the environment and the time in which 30 years before, how they lived, and growing up in that, with that mindset, also puts you in that category, right? Correct me if I'm...
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, it's like kind of the nature nurture thing, and just for me specifically, like growing up, like my parents were, probably teenagers, maybe a little bit younger, in the 60s. And so like them and my grandparents were very involved in the civil rights struggle. And so like I see, like every day, like Cole, like just coming home from school and getting the lectures and the old stories from the old days, from particularly my dad. And so it's like, he was always very much in the mindset of none of this is going to be easy. Like, life isn't easy for anybody, but especially if you're like a Black man growing up in the South, even in the 90s when I was growing up, he's like, none of this is going to be easy. So you need to be honest with yourself about that, but it can be better. And I think that's where he and a lot of people from his generation, I think, were coming from, where it's like, it's a struggle, and it might seem silly at points to be hopeful because there doesn't seem like a lot of hope around, but you got to put the work in and have faith. And again, I'm not talking religion. I'm talking about faith that things can get better. And so like, that's always kind of stuck with me. And like, I know like a lot of conversations I have with people, they're like, how do you have this attitude, or, why are you happy all the time and this and that? And it's like, well, I'm not happy all the time, but I do have just kind of that baseline that I can't get rid of, Cole. Like, it's like she could put the magnets in my head for the experiment and it wouldn't work. Because all of that stuff is stuff that, my dad and my grandparents kind of instilled in me. It's like, you got to keep going. Like, even if you don't want to keep going, you got to keep going.
That's a really interesting experience, because I mean, for me, obviously, like, my parents just spent the most amount of time trying to cheer me up as much as possible, just keep me happy, all the time. And like, as slowly things like started to fall apart around us, you know what I mean? Like, so we had like this, like, okay, stay happy, stay chipper, like, do that. And then everything's sort of turning sour, you know what I mean? Like, in the process. So I wasn't taught necessarily an optimism bias. I was taught just to be happy and ignore it. You know what I mean? So like, a completely opposite experience almost.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point to bring up, especially right now, Cole, because I think one of the things I learned through therapy a couple years ago, and it still is important today, is sometimes it's just okay to be okay. Like, every day is not going to be a great day, and like, there's a lot that you can't control in this world, but you can control yourself and kind of the way you react to the world. And so like, like I totally get that, where it's like, we stay happy, but this is going on and this is going on, but stay happy. And I think a lot of people have had to kind of wrestle with these things, particularly like last year, this year. It's like, how can I be happy when there's nothing to be happy about, at least that I can see, Yeah,
I started to question the idea of that, the facade of that happiness, you know what I mean? Like the like allure of optimism that was basically like a joke, kind of to me. So like, obviously,
happy.
I spent a lot of my like younger years like just rebelling, about everything, like punk rock, and just making sure that I wasn't like a part of this facade of this image of reality that wasn't necessarily true. And I tried to read about society. I had to go to the library to read about what your parents taught you about. You know what I mean? Or, not necessarily what was like there in the history books in school, but what was there in the history books in the library.
Right.
They don't really teach you in high school. I had to ditch school to go read those because I was that type of guy. I wasn't necessarily a rebel. I wasn't necessarily a nerd. I didn't really fit in anywhere, but kind of a little bit of both. And I had to go there to get all my information, to get basically all the facts to give me the weaponry to fight this battle against optimism that my parents had. And so it was a reverse experience for sure.
A quick note on that, maybe Cole and Nate, do we need to play the second one? Or I think Cole already watched it. So is the world getting better or worse? The talk was very interesting, more on facts. And, what Steven Pinker was mentioning on that and explaining it, it's quite interesting. Like I think like audience can watch that out because it's on the public domain. There is no restriction on that. Like they can go to text and view that. Maybe Cole can give us.
We can provide a link in the show description.
Yes, Cole, do you want to talk about that? Like, what do you think about that, or you want us to play that out and then we can talk about it?
Yeah. So, I think probably we maybe don't have enough time to watch and discuss. So maybe we just want to summarize it. So, Steven Pinker, I guess I forget what the name of the video is why the world is getting better, or is the world getting better or worse? I'll look at the numbers. So he basically says that everybody has a pessimism bias when it comes to the outlook about how the world's going to end up, or where the world's going. So they think that, there's going to be more wars, there's going to be more, there's going to be more income inequality and stuff like that, or something. I forget what all the statistics were, which I want to see like the data behind. But he says that in basically every situation that he brings up, that the people have a pessimism bias about where the world's going. That there's going to be all these worse things are going to happen, but they're actually getting better. So the idea I think that I drew from it actually was that we have an optimism bias about ourselves and a pessimism bias about others. And that basically, or that general rule, it doesn't necessarily apply to all of us, but as a general average, that is what is getting the world better. You know what I mean? Our optimism bias about ourselves and a pessimism bias about others is making the world better. So that's what I took out of it. That isn't necessarily they communicated in the videos, but that is the implication. So just one logical deduction away.
Yeah, cool. On that note, right? So you can spin things around, and that's why like I hate like talking about the world or all the other people with looking at the numbers, and people always say like data or facts. Numbers and statistics they don't lie, right? You skew those things according to your convenience, right? Even with that, like he was saying, 30 years before these many number of wars were there and now it's better. Screw you. As a human, we are destroying the planet, and I'm not being pessimist, right? So if we eradicate the entire human population from the world will still be there, right? The environment doesn't need us. But whereas like if you take out mosquitoes or bees, right, it's going to go out of proportion, right? Even in scientific terms, the screw up has been done by us. And how can you say that like in the other way by saying that, we are doing better? how is that justified? Like, that's why, like, I don't want to go by justification of the overall numbers and how we are progressing. Even he mentions that, right? The most progressive people are the one who, intellectuals are the one like who hate progress. So similar to that, I am focused on individuals. If my life is better and I am happy, and we all know that we cannot be happy all the time, still I can cherish my life, then I will have optimism. But whereas if I don't have the opportunities and I am depressed and I am suffering and I am lonely and I don't have enough money or resources to do anything in my life, then how am I going to have that optimism in me? That's my 2 cents. Like, that's my question. Like, here,
I think, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble here, JK, but I feel like, you know, as much as we talked on this program about topics like sexual abuse or human trafficking or racism, you know, modern day slavery, all of these things, they're never going to go away. Like, spoiler alert, like they've been around since before we were born. They'll be around after we're gone. The best we can hope for is that we get it a little bit better this generation than it was the last. And so when it comes to the question, is the world getting better? I would say yes in some aspects, right? Like, it's yes with a qualifier, Cole. Because when I look at particularly like my nieces and like their classmates, when I go down and visit them, like, I feel like people are more open. People are more like, when it comes to gender or race or sexuality, like, I feel like that's getting better. I feel like people are becoming more aware of issues that they didn't think about. And I think the pandemic helped because it forced people to look at some of these issues. But at the end of the day, we're still in a capitalist society that makes money off of war and, you know, makes money off of violence and really doesn't care about the environment. And so I would say we're getting better, Cole, but it's probably more on a personal level, maybe, than a societal level. I don't know.
Yeah, we're kind of like tuning everything out. Yeah, I kind of agree with JK a little bit on this one because, you know, Steven Pinker says, you know, maybe carbon emissions are going down, but carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is going up. You know, it still continues to go up. Maybe wars in general, maybe declared wars have gone down in number, but America is involved in 80 different secret wars right now. 80 different counter-terrorist campaigns in 80 different countries right now. That's a lot of wars at one time. But they're undeclared wars, so they're secret. So, you know, wars in general are going down, apparently. So, you know, basically my pessimism bias gets to speak again. And also, you know, wealth inequality, I don't think he even mentions that, actually, because actually minimum wage back in like the 1950s or whatever, comparatively to what it is now, like back in the 1950s, maybe it was pretty low, or it hasn't risen that much since then, but maybe it was pretty low back then, but comparatively, compared to the wealth disparity that we're seeing now, was actually a pretty high margin of income compared to today. Yeah. So basically today, I don't remember what they had estimated it as, but the minimum wage of 1950 as it would be today is something like, it's got to be at least $15. It's a living wage.
Because the cost of everything's gone up, but the wages have stayed the same.
Yes, because of inflation, which inflation has maintained a solid 2% increase every year, I think. And basically, minimum wage has not maintained that percentage.
No. Which is why a lot of people, I think, and again, this kind of goes back to the pandemic, Cole, like, we're seeing businesses have to at least try to change to lure workers back. Because people are like, I'm not going to work 40, 50 hours a week and put my body through this for $8 an hour or $10 an hour. Like, it's not worth it to me. I'm not seeing my family. I'm just working, and I'm not having a good living off of that working. You know, I'm not at a point where my work, my sweat equity code is equal to the quality of life. And I think a lot of people during the pandemic are like, nah, like things need to change. And hopefully these companies are starting to listen a little bit more, but there's a lot of work to be done on that front.
Yeah, and I want to correct myself. Maybe it wasn't the minimum wage in the 50s, but the average wage that actually didn't meet the same requirements of inflation. But something's awry there as well. There may actually be a kind of increase there, but I have to research it more. I'm obviously just looking at the first websites I'm seeing, but you can never trust those. By the way, if anybody wants to actually research something, type site:/edu at the end of your search, and you'll return all of the educational institution websites. And you can, if you scroll down a little bit the page, you can get studies from Harvard and MIT if you want.
Just like on the minimum wage front, like I can tell you from experience here in Virginia, when some of my friends have gotten jobs, like in 2019, so this is only 2 years ago. In 2019, the minimum wage in Virginia was $7.86. And now it's like they've moved it up to 10, but still, like 10 is still low, in my opinion, for a lot of folks that are working these jobs that we said were essential last year, Cole. The grocery store workers, the food service workers, people like that. We said they were essential, but we're not paying them like they're essential.
Yeah, and I actually worked in the grocery store right around the time COVID hit, and it was kind of like being at the intersection of society as it slowly drove itself insane, or quickly drove itself insane. People were scrambling all over. There was frenzies of trying to get everything they could.
Yep.
The toilet paper ran out, and I had to communicate that to people and what exactly was happening there. Some people still don't get it. Well, toilet paper basically isn't meant to handle a lot of consumption all at once. It's meant to be kind of slowly taken little by little. And so when everybody gets it all at the same time, it disappears. So basically everybody stocked up at the same time, and it wasn't good. So yeah, and then after that, it was like the ingredients to make homemade bread would actually start disappearing. So because people started making bread at a certain point, which is interesting. Yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah, different issues like with regard to lifestyle and supply chain and all those things, right? The businesses, how they are manipulating it. All these things are impactful, right? So let's wrap up it because we have few more minutes trying to get our final thoughts in this, and maybe more relevant to optimism, we'll take a note on that from each one of us. And
I was just going to say, JK, is the hourglass half full or half empty right now?
Yeah, so if you want water, like that half you will take, and if you want air, you can take the empty part, whatever that is. That's how I see, like that question itself can be made irrelevant. But here, like what I am trying to see from Stop Now as such, right? So we, Cole and Savita, you all know about, we are fighting about the modern slavery and various issues here. And in that process itself, right, we have come along for almost a year. It was not out of optimism. We tried our luck. We thought like, okay, this will work. And there was no pessimism or optimism in it. And the good news is, like, I would say, like, we reached 1,000 subscribers in the last few months. And that was a big achievement. And we are getting quite a lot of attention and traction, and we have been approved as a 501c3 nonprofit public charity to raise funds. That's a good thing, and we can tap on our back saying that like we did a good job, and that is optimism for me. So it's not just the results, But at the end of what we were trying to achieve, we know that, like as you mentioned, Nate, right? We cannot eradicate modern slavery, or we cannot stop H1B. Those things, still we are trying that, and that is what the experiment is all about. And Cole is going to be the star in this next, and we can talk about that maybe in the next talk show, and Cole has to give us some update on that. So with your final comments, we can end this, hopefully, if you guys agree to it.
Yeah, good talk. Another good one, Nate. Yeah, what was I supposed to update on? The experiment?
Yes, we can talk about that. You are going to be the star, right? So what is your name again? Daddy?
You're not supposed to know that. So we wrote like a comedy script, and JK kind of stuck to it. But you know, Nate, I did the thing again. Where I wrote a comedy script because JK wants to have fun, you know. So I'm like, okay, let's have fun then, you know. And he doesn't stick to the script, so that's fun. So got to deal with these creative issues. You know what I mean? Like
that's what happens. Is actors. He's always improvising. He's always going off script.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, Nate, you know, right? You know Cole as well, right? How much trouble he gives. So, you know, like how much I have put up with him in the last 10 days. You were not there in the last week.
Cole is a very difficult director to work with.
Slave driver. Oh, no.
Still, I have the optimism, and you'll be surprised. He got placed twice, and two job offers is waiting for him, and he is protesting like not to work for those companies. I'll share with you like offline.
Yeah, they're good stories. I mean, just walking in the intense heat, like just trying to get to these like testing sites, it's just amazing.
Yes,
great stories, great times.
Because COVID is still a thing. So yeah. I'm excited to hear the stories, and I'm sure the audience can't wait to get more updates on the experiments. Cole, I think the last thing I would say on this is piggybacking off of what JK said. Like even if we can't eliminate a lot of these problems or all of these problems, there is still value in the work and making things a little bit better, you know, and keeping the fight going. So, you know, I would say I'm going to still be optimistic. Maybe I'll be a penguin with a parachute, Cole. Like I'm taking a leap, but I'm always prepared. So I hope everybody has a great week. Always good to talk to you, Cole. And unless you got anything else to say, I guess we can call it a show.
Well, I mean, by what you're doing, you're making the world a better place, obviously. So keep doing what you're doing.
I'll pack 2 parachutes just in case you need one.
Yeah, you're gonna. Yeah, I'll give you mine. That's cool.